Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Doomed Productions podcast, a podcast hosted by Doomed Productions. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Ethan.
And we're here to talk about all things movies. Hopefully you've seen us on YouTube, maybe you've seen some of our feature films, and if you kind of want to get a deeper dive into us and our thoughts and opinions, well, you've come to the right place. How you doing today, Ethan?
Oh, I thought you were asking the audience at first. I'm doing very well.
Yeah.
Just been working. It's a Monday.
Yeah.
So when we record these is on Mondays, so it's the start of the work week. But
yeah. And you'll be listening to it at the end on Friday.
You'll be listening on Friday. So who knows what's happened between when this is recorded and when you're listening?
You know, this is a good place to announce, maybe. Well, because it is kind of on the logo.
Announce.
Well, we will be filming something this Friday when you're listening to it.
Yeah.
What that is, you will find out. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
We're pretty excited about the project.
Yeah. Something a little different from Productions. Not the status quo over here.
Yeah, a little bit different. But we've also done them before. I'm going to cheat. Yeah, we'll keep it vague. Yeah, we'll just stop it there.
Well, that's good enough.
Anyways, while you struggle to think about what could they be doing this Friday, what are they doing? Or Saturday, we're also
there's a whole weekend ahead.
We're doing stuff this upcoming weekend. That's
this
all
weekend is doomed.
Yeah. Anyways, while you're kind of trying to think about what you think we might be doing, we're here to discuss a question.
A question they've been asking since the dawn of cinema.
Yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe...
Probably not.
We'll see. And that question is, what movies can you watch that will make you a better filmmaker?
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they want to become filmmakers, they'll ask, how do I become a filmmaker? Like, what do I need to do? And you'll hear the advice like, film stuff, make stuff, write.
Practice your transitions, your edits.
All that kind of stuff. And then people will tell you just to watch movies.
Yes.
And no one will tell you, or very few people will tell you, how watching movies will make you a better filmmaker. So now is kind of a good opportunity, we thought, that to talk about, how exactly does watching a movie make you better? Maybe it's better to start with that. What about watching a movie will make you a better filmmaker?
Well, it's a great reference point. So you're learning what's your taste through that without having to go through the trial and error process of making a whole bunch of things to find what you like. Because you can kind of pull from movies that speak to you, whether it's thematically or genre or whatever. There's an infinite number of things in movies that can speak to you. But you can kind of workshop what connects, what doesn't, and from there you can kind of narrow down a body of work. And whether that's for a specific movie you want to make, because I know for us, we'll usually sometimes find like inspiration movies, whether that's for like the cinematography or whatever, the directing, the acting choices, all those things kind of funnel and filter through your brain, and then you come out of that with reference points of your movie style, and that's how you grow. And that's one avenue, I guess, that'll help you grow.
I think it's kind of like learning a language.
Yeah.
Because like if you're learning a language, you have to be immersed in. You go to class, you learn the rules, the grammar, but you have to speak to people. You have to listen to people. You have to read and write in that language, whatever it is. And cinema has its own kind of visual grammar and language to it. So it's the same principle. Or, with any other art, if you want to be an artist, go look at a bunch of art that inspires you. Or if you want to be a writer, go read a whole bunch of different books. Exposing yourself to different works of art or new languages or writings, what that does is it shows you what's possible and what you can do. It gives you a generic framework at the very least of here's what I can work in. Now, how do I push the boundaries forward?
Yeah,
I think. Or what am I interested in? What, like you said, what makes me tick as a filmmaker? What am I interested in exploring or developing? Things of that nature, I guess. That's why it's important. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was very eloquently said.
Okay. I was trying to I've been talking a bunch today, and I feel like I need to water my throat. Hold on.
What are you drinking?
Seltzer water.
Polar
Water.
watermelon.
The unofficial sponsor of Wild Boys. Hunt for Sasquatch.
Generally, Shasta is the unofficial Doom Productions sponsor, but Wild Boys has their own special branding with Polar. Polar, if you're listening right now, hit us up.
Yeah, I drink probably like 5 gallons of Polar water.
Do you hear how dedicated Jordan is, Polar? Why aren't you messaging us?
I know.
Slide into those DMs.
Anyway, so if you hear me like a nasty like noise of like
if you just hear
a hot dog sliding through mud, like kind of, well, that's
how do you drink water?
No, I mean, if you hear a gross kind of liquidy noise, it's probably me swallowing my water, because talking a lot makes my throat dry, and then I trip over my words, and that's okay. What were we actually talking about?
Wow,
damn it!
How many minutes in are we?
A tangent. 6 minutes in.
Wow, that's unusual.
Wow, I genuinely forgot what we were talking about.
Usually we just make it 20 minutes. We just went over the idea of
how watching movies will make you a better filmmaker.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, those are reasons. Now, we wanted to get into some practical kind of movies you can look to for specific ways of improving. Now, we haven't sat down, we haven't talked about this before. In fact, I don't even think we sat down and tried to think about these prior to...
You're getting the candid Doom Productions thought process here.
I mean, I think to an extent, if we came into this premeditated with a list, that would, I don't know, feel... I mean, maybe we would have been better prepared, but like...
It would have been a bit more prescribed.
It would just more listy kind of thing, and I think having this be more organic is just as it comes to us, that's really good. So I guess, first up, if someone is a fresh, brand new kid, let's say they've seen Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Marvel movies, and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to do what the Russo brothers do, or I want to do what so-and-so does. So very generic, very standard. Like, I haven't been exposed...
You haven't seen...
to, like, I hate this word, but, like, quote-unquote high cinema or, like, art film, cinema kind of stuff. If you're a brand spanking new, filmmaker or want to be a filmmaker, what's a movie that they can watch, that someone can watch and be like, oh, like, that's what you can do with movies, or that's something new or different.
Yeah. So if you're coming from that, I guess, traditional blockbustery Hollywood background, and that's kind of all you've been exposed to, I guess this would also just depend on the person. But my first thought goes to like, okay, what's kind of that vein but adjacent? And my first thought goes to just like the A24 umbrella, where it's still in that like traditional Hollywood vein, but they still... They take a lot, and it gets into that artsy fartsy realm and kind of moves in and out of that. So I think of stuff like Green Knight. I'm not going to say The Lighthouse.
I'll say The Lighthouse.
You can say The Lighthouse. Not that I don't agree with The Lighthouse. I just say The Lighthouse all the time. I'm trying to be better.
The Witch.
It's new year, new me.
Hereditary.
The Witch, Hereditary. Yeah, all of those.
Uncut Gems.
Midsummer. Yeah, I think that's just a good... Sorry, it's not a specific movie, but just the A24 umbrella, I think, is a great start into the more artistic side of Hollywood.
And I think it's also, I like what you said, it's like adjacent to the blockbusters, because A24, people believe that it's independent movies. And you know what? It is produced outside of physical LA Hollywood, but they got A-list stars in it.
Yeah.
They got a couple $1 million for each project. That's a big Hollywood movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or film industry movie, I should say.
That is unobtainable from someone at our level.
Yeah. Unless you're like Bill Gates or whatever.
Yeah.
And you have all that money just to spend.
Yeah.
So that's putting it as like, okay, so you've seen a bunch of Marvel movies, blockbusters, you saw Free Guy or whatever. I don't know what, there's so many different blockbusters out these days. Here are some different kinds of movies to get you an idea of
what's possible.
Yes, here's what else is out there.
Yeah.
And that'll help you become a better filmmaker, because if you want to make a movie, you should kind of, again, as we said, immerse yourself in everything you can. Everything and anything. And here's why we recommend, this is assuming why I would recommend A24 to any newcomer. Like if a high schooler came up to me, I would say A24 because a lot of kids or people just in general have a kind of aversion to older movies.
Yeah.
And they're kind of hard to get into.
Yeah.
Like as much as I would love to say, oh, watch like the Hollywood brats from the 70s, watch like Scorsese,
Here's some
Kubrick,
Citizen Kane for you.
you know, even like Jane Campion
Yeah.
or like some more like 90s stuff, even that might be a little bit old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the
yeah.
90s were
That was 30
years ago. I mean,
We're
it's
getting
not
old.
fun to say, but you know, so so you watch an A24 movie or, you know, an artsy fartsy kind of blockbuster kind of movie, like even a Denis Villeneuve kind of thing,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Enemy. Did you see Enemy yet?
No.
Oh, it's so good. Anyways, you watch one of those movies and then watch like an interview with those directors and they'll say who inspired them. And they'll probably point you to someone who was making movies in the 90s or 80s or 70s. So then watch different stuff, figure out what contemporary director you like their work of, and then work backwards.
That's a great idea.
And then work, so like Edgar Wright loved Sam Raimi, so then watch a bunch of Sam Raimi movies. You know, Sam Raimi likes so-and-so, and then watch a bunch of so-and-so movies, and kind of work your way backwards. That way you kind of continue on this trail of like, it's somewhat familiar. Whereas if you just jumped into the 70s blind, and you're not really a fan of gritty crime movies, if you watch Scorsese's 70s movies, oh boy, you're in for a rough time, I think. If you just jump, and then it might turn you off of watching.
I hate 70s movies.
It might feel a little more like homework. So
Yeah.
again, if you want to be a better filmmaker, you got to watch as much stuff as possible. One, to figure out your taste and what you're interested in, but also just to be exposed to different stuff. And watching it through the lens of, I like this filmmaker was inspired by this other filmmaker, and just work your way backwards.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to watch movies, I think. Now, more practical, like becoming a filmmaker, as a director, what's a movie where you can really, I guess, get a sense of the director's presence,
Okay.
what exactly a director does? Because we all see those names that say directed by
Chris Nolan.
or Peter Jackson or whoever else you're watching. When that name comes up, it's kind of abstract what that means, maybe. It can be.
Yeah.
So what's a movie where you can feel like the auteurness of the director and their personality
Yeah.
to see how, and maybe a better way to answer this one is like, what are a handful of different kinds of movies where you feel the director to kind of show how like
This director is different from this director.
Yes.
Is different from yeah. I mean, I think you brought up Edgar Wright. That's someone who's got a very you can tell an Edgar Wright movie from anyone else. He's got a very kinetic style of shooting.
Yeah.
A lot of wit, it's fast-paced edits mixed with fast-paced dialogue, a lot of comedy, and a lot of action within that as well. Think of stuff like Baby Driver, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. Like, if you watch those, I think you get a very clear idea of who Edgar Wright is as a director.
If you had to pick one, though,
If I had to pick one,
just only one and only one,
I think I'm going to have to go with Shaun of the Dead. Hot Fuzz. I'm going to go with Hot Fuzz.
I think it's so
But
so
also,
tricky.
that's my favorite Edgar Wright, so maybe it's a little biased.
Hot Fuzz is a good one. I like that one. I'm trying to think of when I think of characteristically what is so like, oh, that is so Edgar Wright. I guess you're right. I think Hot Fuzz, because it's got the humor, it's got the genre blending.
Yeah.
It has
Genre bending, that's another thing.
it has all his kind of formal techniques that he uses. You know, music syncing.
Yeah.
You know, the whip pans, the smash zooms, the
British.
the Britishness of it all. That's a good pick. Yeah, Hot Fuzz. I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Another director, someone who's kind of contemporary, I think. Gee, I didn't think about anything. I was just listening to what you were saying. I should have been thinking about another director.
That's what's so hard about podcasts.
Yeah. That's
Should I
very
be
true.
listening or should I be thinking of the next thing I'm going to say? It's the worst.
I think another one who's very different but also is good is, again, not to harp on.
I know exactly what you're about to say.
I'm going to say Edgar Wright. All right, no. Oh, sorry.
Stealing my answer?
No. Robert Eggers.
Okay, that's not what I thought you were going to
Okay,
say.
I think I know. Okay. So Robert Eggers directed The Witch and The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
One of our favorite movies.
Speaking of A24.
I know. very different than Edgar Wright. Lots of things are a lot more still. The camera lighting is a lot more, I guess, I don't want to say realistic, but there's a
Natural.
there's kind of a realism to it all. And it's historical. So it's kind of rare to have like movies set so like far like in the past feel so real.
They really harp on like the language
Good.
that characters use.
Yes, and if you're comparing a Robert Eggers movie to how someone speaks in an Edgar Wright movie, completely different.
Yes.
And you see what those two different directors are interested in.
Yeah.
And tone, I mean, Hot Fuzz is nothing like
The Witch.
The Witch or The Lighthouse. If I had to pick one, I like... See, both The Witch and The Lighthouse, those would have to be in my top like 20 or 50 movies of all time.
I've been meaning to watch The Witch again.
I would have to say The Witch. I think I would recommend The Witch to someone because it's a little more accessible.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think I like...
The Lighthouse is more our thing.
The Lighthouse is more my thing. I love both of them, but I think The Witch is way more accessible to more people. What is another director? What is another kind of filmmaker who, if we're comparing Hot Fuzz, The Witch, who's another filmmaker to be like, oh, this person's completely different?
I'm going to say it.
Oh, are you going to say it?
I'm going to say it.
Okay. Oh, boy.
Who's he going to say? Half the people who are listening are like, what's he going to say? Why does he make such a big deal? The other half are like, oh my gosh, here they go again.
Yeah.
It's Zack Snyder.
Yeah, Zack
It's
Snyder.
Zack Snyder. In terms of styles, I'm just going to not jump into it too much. If you know Zack Snyder's work, very stylized. He pulls a lot from comic books. A lot of his movies are comic book based. And he has this very heightened reality style.
I want to add to I think in this case, so again, if anyone's not aware, which you probably are, we're both big Zack Snyder fans. This isn't a diss on him.
Yeah.
I think comparing Snyder to directors like Eggers or Edgar Wright might be a little misleading is not the right word.
Got it. I see.
He's working at a much higher budget with far different concepts. I think it's a lot more fair to compare someone like Snyder to someone like the Russo brothers.
Got it.
Or even contemporary Steven Spielberg or Peter Jackson might be a better... Or Gore Verbinski, who directed Lone Ranger and Rango and the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Because those are blockbusters.
That's a good
While
point.
I do love Snyder and I love his blockbusters, I think he's the best blockbuster director out there today.
Yeah.
His work, I think, is better compared to contemporary blockbuster directors because he's working in... That is such a different world than... you know, the under $5 million budget kind of movie where he's working into the $200 million movie.
The truly big budget, yeah.
But I do agree.
Yeah.
I agree that he's someone to look at,
Yes.
but pairing with Wright and Eggers, maybe not so much.
I see where you're
But
going,
at the same time, there is something there. But
yeah,
I agree
lean
and
more
disagree.
into stylization than
Yes.
budget level. Let me think of another answer. You say something.
Well, again, I think if we're talking blockbuster directors, obviously the people to look at are Chris Nolan, Denis Villeneuve,
Peter
Jackson, Steven Spielberg, Zack Snyder, Gore Verbinski, James Cameron, George Lucas,
Michael Bay.
And while those movies on the surface may not seem completely different, I think you can look for subtle differences there. Whereas Edgar Wright,
mid-budget.
Edgar Wright and Robert Eggers, very, very different filmmakers with different sensibilities. Excuse me, completely. So it's almost like better to study those drastic changes before studying the subtle ones. But again, like, oh my gosh, we could go. I feel like
Digressing from that.
You're digressing, yeah. So far, Hot Fuzz, The Witch. Snyder, but kind of not Snyder, but Snyder.
Snyder with the asterisk, big asterisk.
Yeah. Who else?
I know. I'm going into my IMDb. Someone like maybe this might not. Someone like Matt Johnson. I know that's on the lower end of that budget
Much
for
lower.
sure. But that's someone who again is still in that like not big budget but has very distinct style. If you're watching like Nirvana the band, the show, which is a TV show, not a movie, but also something like Operation Avalanche. It might have some similarities to something like Edgar Wright, but not quite.
But the cinema kind of verite style, like the pseudo documentary, that is something that I can't think of a big budget director who's doing that. Aside from, he works in TV, but Nathan Fielder.
Yeah.
And he's not necessarily directing everything, but every show he touches does kind of have that Nathan For You vibe.
Yeah.
And that's hard. But I think, Matt Johnson in terms of, I think that's I get.
I know.
I want to say yes.
In the...
But I also want to say that I think he's too low budget. He's a better example of what you can do with next to no budget.
Yeah.
So it's like the opposite Snyder thing.
It's the opposite.
So again, I'm agreeing but disagreeing.
Yeah. That's why I said Operation Avalanche. I know that's probably one of his bigger budget things. I'm trying to sneak it in there.
Oh, if we're talking blockbuster movie directors for a second, the Wachowski siblings.
The Wachowskis. Yep.
Fantastic filmmakers.
Also George Lucas.
Well, I said that.
Oh, did you? I did. I missed it.
No worries. Pardon us as we just scroll through.
I know.
Letterbox.
Well, some people I'm like, oh shoot, I haven't watched enough of their stuff to like say the answer for sure. So I'm just like holding off.
Well, I think another filmmaker, very different, like than the stuff that we usually do, would be. So we have Robert Eggers, The Witch. Edgar Wright, Hot Fuzz. Daniel Dustin Cretton, who most people probably know because he just directed Shang-Chi, but he did a kind of a streak of drama movies. Like he was an indie director for a long time. Or it's Destin Daniel Cretton. That's his name. He has this great movie called Short Term 12. And I think he did Just Mercy. And he's done a couple of, Brie Larson's been in all of his movies. And this was before she really blew up, so I feel comfortable. Yeah. I feel like that's a comfortable comparison because obviously if you make a Brie Larson movie now, that's not really low budget. At the time, I don't think she was super mega huge. So Destin Daniel Cretton, I think he's a good example of a director to kind of throw in there in terms of a contemporary director who's got a different style than either of the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Short Term 12, obviously. I would say Short Term 12 is a great one. Kind of, I mean, it's not documentary style, but it's got a very kind of organic feel with handheld camera work and stuff like that. If we had to pick, I feel like we should pick 5. Who are like, we need 2 more. 2 more directors.
Hold on.
You looking on...
I've got someone who I'm like, oh man, this answer doesn't work as well anymore. It's like minus 2 of his movies. I would say Rian Johnson. If you'd got rid of Star Wars and Knives Out. If you're looking like at things like Looper and like Brick.
Looper's still pretty big.
I know.
I would assume. This is a hard. I mean, maybe we should have sat down and thought about. Oh! You know, I know who. But it's so similar. You know, it's similar, but I don't care because she's awesome. Anna Lily Amapour directed A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic vampire movie. Great director. I would throw that one out. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. That's a great movie where you can kind of feel like a different style and tone and you feel the hand of the director on it.
Yeah.
Where when you watch it, like, oh, when people say that filmmaker has a point of view, that's a point of view right there, I think. Yeah. And maybe that's a little similar to The Witch.
Yeah.
Robert Eggers, a little bit. It's also not. It kind of is. I don't know. I feel okay. What's one more? We need like, oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. Yeah.
I'm showing Ethan a letterbox to
giving me
get
an
his
out.
his stand. Oh, well, just seeing like if he agrees because I think it's a good one.
Hold up.
Sorry to have like so many just like
Pauses.
well that and just like these are very cliche choices. Like these are already kind of popular directors, but again, this is for folks who want to know what a director's presence,
Yes.
what an individual director can offer a movie.
Yeah.
And so if you stack up Hot Fuzz, The Witch, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Short Term 12, and this last one,
Yeah.
what
So,
do we get?
Damien Chazelle, with who's done things like Whiplash and La La Land. Yeah. What was it? There was a question beyond that.
Well, like how does he? I mean, what does he bring to it all?
I mean, it's a lot of rhythmic musical type movies, very tight editing, a lot of character stuff too.
Yeah.
Really intense character stuff. Good kind of mix. Kind of gets into that Edgar Wrighty a little bit with the musical, but at the same time,
But that doesn't define.
no.
He doesn't make the mundane fantastical. Edgar Wright does that.
Yeah.
Damien Chazelle kind of makes music fantastical because he comes from a musical. He went to school for music, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good example.
I've never seen La La Land.
You've never seen it?
No.
You liar! You filthy liar! How could you do this to me? No.
I saw Whiplash twice though.
Whiplash is very good. I think, and just because these other guys popped in my head, Lulu Wang, The Farewell.
That's been on my list for so long.
Fantastic drama. I am personally, I think we've talked about this before. I'm not a huge fan of drama films.
Yeah.
We love genre and kind of some stuff that isn't quote unquote realistic. Lulu Wang's style in The Farewell, like that's the kind of drama I love, like those style of movies. And she's a fantastic. She did a great job with that. I think she's only done short films prior to that, really.
Yeah.
I think that was her.
I remember looking her up after trying to find more stuff. And
She didn't have a whole lot, but
yeah, it's a really small.
fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and also very different from all the other directors listed so far. Anyways, we spent a lot of time on this one question, which was originally what are films you can watch to feel the presence of a director, to kind of know what their job is.
Yeah.
More. We've already went through all of them, so we're not going to do it again. Okay. Trying to.
That was a long segment.
I know, long segment. Sorry, people. In terms of specific jobs, like let's not put into a category. Think of a movie and what you can learn from that movie. So, for instance, I think something like Burning, the Korean movie, South Korean movie.
No, I was looking for a moment to bring up Burning at some point. I was trying to find the right category. You took
Well,
it from me.
this is
But
for
it's
my
a great
example.
pick. It's a great pick.
Burning, I think, is an example of how dialogue can be treated as literature, I think. Like, 'cause so much of that movie, I mean, it's driven by the words that are spoken and the words that aren't spoken. And from a film perspective, like technical-wise, it's got fairly standard coverage. It's very well done. That's not a knock on the coverage or how it's all edited and shot and all that kind of stuff. Very brilliantly well done. But what really stands out is the dialogue. And, excuse me, gosh, what stands out in that is the dialogue and how it's very understated.
Yeah.
I think understated is a good word. It's not very flashy. Aaron Sorkin, if you want to watch if you want to learn about screenwriting, watch something like The Social Network. That's a great kind of script. People in that movie talk very differently than people in Burning, and part of that is different countries, different languages. But the way that Burning uses dialogue is very different than how Social Network uses dialogue. And I would say The Social Network is more comparable to a play, whereas Burning is more comparable to a piece of literature, like a book to sit down and read. That's not saying that Burning is better. That's saying it, to me, sounds like dialogue that I can read out of like, you know, a 12,000 page kind of drama book, whereas Social Network is like, oh, I'd go to Broadway and I'd see this performed on stage.
That's an interesting comparison.
That was all my example. That probably didn't help, but
So
anyway, what are movies? What's a great movie? Or I guess what's easier to answer, what is a movie that you've seen, and what was something you took away from it? What was something you learned from it? Yes.
I don't watch movies. Just kidding.
Here at Doom Productions, we don't watch movies.
We don't watch movies because we don't have to. No, just kidding. I'm trying to think of like something that's got like a really specific needle point kind of to it.
That's what's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's tricky. Man, I should have looked stuff ahead of time, man.
Well, we didn't plan this out before, and
No, we didn't. We didn't. Every time there's a pause, I think of the audience and just like, just say something already.
screaming at us. We're
just
sorry.
pick something.
We're sorry.
The movie ones are always the hardest. It's always the hardest.
Well, I can suggest something.
Okay.
Because I know we've taken from this movie before.
What do you got?
Mandy. Panos Cosmatos.
Mandy.
Because I know but you're the cinematographer out of us, so I
Yeah.
know you took stuff from that.
Yeah.
Or rather, it was kind of up our alley, and there's
It
stuff
just,
we've
like,
learned from it.
Pushed us another step further into that realm.
So what can you learn from Mandy?
You can learn how to not be a little baby when it comes to lighting and light things normally. Natural lighting, get out of here. All red lighting, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
No, I mean, Mandy, stepping back a little bit here. No, Mandy is something where it kind of challenges just traditional shooting methods where you're constantly changing the color of the scene. There's fades and wipes and all kinds of weird editing choices that they'll make throughout it. It kind of is a great movie if you're in a rut on how you should shoot something, or if you're like used to shooting things one specific way and you want to kind of find something totally different. Mandy's a great jump in if you want to kind of just dive into the deep end of like how far cinema can go to look a certain way. Because it's just got so many weird choices that work super well.
If you're into experimental film
Yeah.
too, and kind of trance films, and kind of something that's a little bit different, I think it's also a good example, maybe for people who aren't into that stuff, to like dip their toe into the water. Because I've said it before, but I firmly believe that a movie is more than just a script. There's an idea that's perpetuated in Hollywood that, you know, a movie's only as good as its script or as its story. And to me, filmmaking is not story. Filmmaking is film. It's its own thing. Because when you talk about story, they really are just talking about literature.
Yeah.
Mandy's a great example of, you know, it's a story we've seen before. Dialogue-wise, it's very sparse. You know, I think the main character probably says like 50 lines. No, not even like 20 lines maybe at the very most.
A lot of it's narration.
A lot of it's narration. It's an experience that's unique to films. It tells the story in a new way, in an interesting way. It's not even like in a very original story. And the director said that, you know. It's very plainly, it's, you know, about a guy, something bad happens to his lady. Revenge. Like very cliche, very overdone.
But done in a way that's so different.
Yes, completely. I remember when I said Nick Cage has made this exact same story a billion times in a lot of his direct-to-DVD cheap kind of movies. Never like that. And never has it utilized him like that.
Yeah.
So I think Mandy's a great pick for, I guess, both cinematography, but how you don't really need a amazing script.
No.
I don't think. Because you can
You
make
just need Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, you need Nicolas Cage. You can tell all that with tone and mood and atmosphere and editing and lighting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Thank you. That pick was all mine. I worked hard on finding that one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what's a good movie to think about when you talk about like editing. Like what can you learn from? Obviously, Edgar Wright has very punchy editing, very kind of flashy editing.
Yeah.
So, Hot Fuzz is definitely. In my head, Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim are probably his
Pilgrim, yeah.
his most like, oh my gosh, look at the editing, like it's all in your face.
Yeah. What's a more subdued edit?
Yeah, what's something that's a little more subtle?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm trying to find that mid tier because I think of like big movies. I'm like, oh, that's got really interesting editing, but it's not the right thing.
yeah. Again, more of a flashy kind of thing, but Memento by Chris Nolan. That's a good example of like, here's how editing can
Since
change.
you brought up Nolan,
Yeah.
Tenet I think has interesting editing choices in it. Not necessarily. I mean, it's yeah. And Dunkirk probably more so.
Again, that goes back to
But-
Nolan's thing on playing with time.
Yeah.
So it's editing in a different way, but it can show you that things don't need to be linear.
Yeah.
They can be a little bit complex and
A little back and forth.
You don't need to, actually a better director of that, I think, not better, but like a more
Better
subtle,
example, yeah.
because Nolan will take that premise of editing, of like playing with time, and that'll be like, I don't mean gimmick in a bad way, but that'll be kind of the gimmick throughout the movie. Like Memento is told backwards.
Yeah.
Dunkirk is told at different times.
Different rates.
Yes. Tenet deals with time travel.
Yeah.
Someone like Park Chan-wook, who directed Old Boy.
Oh, okay.
But I think he plays with time in a very interesting way in his movies. And I think a good example of that is his movie Stoker. There's a scene where, I mean, the best way to put it is, a scene at a key point in the movie will reach its kind of high point. And then it cuts to something seemingly completely different. And it'll play out. So let's say you are shooting, you're at scene A, B, C, D. You're at scene D. It will cut from, it won't show E, F, G. It'll instead cut to scene H and play out scene H longer than it would. And through doing that, it'll show you E, F, G peppered throughout that.
Oh,
That's
weird.
the best way I can explain it without describing it exactly, but Stoker is a good example of like showing there is some kind of more flashy editing, but from a narrative point of view, skipping over some things and leaving you with some questions. I mean, just in his movies, he's got a lot of that kind of stuff, but I think Stoker is a good example. That was his first English language movie, and I think that's a pretty good example of that.
The real thing that we're learning from this podcast, if you want to learn cinema, you should be watching Korean cinema.
Yeah, I know. Really, watch Korean movies. You'll learn a lot. Are there any other editing movies you can think of?
It's that thing of like the second we stop recording this on my drive home, be like,
We're gonna think about
why
it.
didn't I say that?
Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Okay.
Just get to that.
Editing, being a better filmmaker. What's what are other aspects of filmmaking?
That
We
you
covered
learn from
writing a little
watching
bit. We
movies.
talked about editing a little bit. We talked about directing. Is that all you can learn from movies?
I think something that's valuable for someone at our level when you're watching movies, or even someone who's just starting out as a filmmaker, you kind of learn to a certain extent. I mean, this is a little bit of from trial and error as well, and from practicing actual filmmaking, but you learn what's approachable and like what you can do.
Yeah.
I think you kind of figure out like, oh yeah, I could film a scene where 3 people are talking and it's on a bridge and that looks really cool. Like you can do that. You can also watch, Hollywood movies like, I'm not going to probably shoot a movie with robots tomorrow that are like 3 stories tall. So I think it's kind of nice to be like, I could do that. And I think that's a film school thing where they'll have you like shoot a scene from a movie. I feel like I've seen people talk about that in their film school experiences, where you shoot a scene from a movie, you have to just recreate it.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to kind of get a handle on.
Yeah.
And I think that is something, I think that's a less important thing or less huge thing, but I think it's still there.
I think that's really important. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think
Yes, then it is really important.
well, I think even something we learned a lot is like when we saw a movie and we're like, oh my gosh, look at what these people are doing with no money or very little resources. It inspires you and shows you what you can do. So I think that is a good avenue to go down. So someone like Matt Johnson. So watch The Dirties, Operation Avalanche. Very, very, I mean, he was the first guy to I think really blow us away.
Yeah.
In terms of, oh my gosh, that's like, you know,
so obtainable.
Obtainable and not obtainable. It's like that's so genius. Like everything about that is so genius. What he's doing, and he has almost no resources. So that's such a good example of like, high budget or not high, but low budget version. Other popular people. I mean, the big one is Clerks. El Mariachi. By Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez famously made El Mariachi for $7,000, I think.
Yeah.
And he sold his blood and became a guinea pig in drug experiments to get that movie funded. So that's a good one. We've talked about this a little, but what are YouTube feature films that people could watch to like learn from?
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, kind of segue into what we do and what this community we're kind of a part of.
Yeah. Do we want to go into different styles, or were we going into just what you can learn from watching?
I think what you can learn, like what's a movie that was released for free on YouTube by someone with relatively no budget, where it's like, oh my gosh, look at what you can do. I thought you need to, show you something that's different than Hollywood.
I mean, big example of something that came out recently is Void Man, which blew both of us away. A movie
with scope,
with huge scope. You can tell. I mean, obviously, it's a movie made just by friends working together and trying to pull this project off, but the scale in which they do everything is really incredible.
I think particularly to filmmakers. I think if you're a filmmaker, you'll probably really like get what they're doing. I think you'll see that and it'll kind of blow you away more than maybe someone who's not into filmmaking.
Yes.
So I think there's some great, particularly I think we've talked about this before, the opening 30 minutes or so is just moving all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of like what movement can do in a movie. I think the first movie I saw on YouTube that really truly blew my, well, there's two. This isn't actually the first. The first one was Island by Joel Haber.
Yeah.
Which I don't think let's talk about it.
Yeah.
That's a great example. It throws out all of your preconceived notions about what filmmaking can be, and like, oh my gosh, you can make a movie like this. Island does that and will expand your mind, and that's a movie. I don't rewatch YouTube feature films as much as like other movies that I've seen or whatever. Island I've come back to so many different times. Island was the first movie that showed me like, oh my gosh, this is what you can do with no money just on YouTube.
Yeah.
The next one, might have been the only other one. No, there's two other ones. But the next one, Seventh by RC Films.
Great pick.
That's a movie that could play in theaters.
100%.
That's a movie that can play on Netflix. That movie is so accessible to people who are into stuff like Chronicle, Blair Witch Project, kind of more blockbustery type stuff. I think
the Super 8, I think people like Super 8 could get into it.
Super 8, yeah, that's a great pick. I think that's a movie where if I'm a high schooler or if a high schooler came to me and said, "Oh, I want to be a filmmaker, but what can I do with no money? It's not going to look any good or it's not going to feel like a real movie," I would show them Seven and be like, "You're wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong, because this movie is crazy. It's amazing. It feels very contemporary. It doesn't feel like it's a cheap movie. In fact, it feels like, again, it feels like the exact kind of thing I would see browsing through Netflix. And it's crazy to me that movie isn't more popular outside of the YouTube space. So Seventh, 100% of the way.
Yeah, great pick.
RC Films is, in terms of scope, I think they have a great, like, they're able to capture scope so well.
Yeah.
Who else?
Just quiet there. I think it's something like Chlorine by Dan Lotz.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good one. I think, again, cinematography-wise, the 922 films are always very good, and Dan's got a good grasp of, again, what he can pull off. Dan Lotz from 922 Films, he's the director there.
I'll you know what? Mute Date by Cody Clark.
Yeah.
That's one where the whole movie is static shots of two people standing, really, in a park, not talking. And it's all told through voiceover. And it is a brilliant sci-fi concept. Like, that is a great premise for a science fiction thing. And it's told in such an interesting, fun way where it's totally very real. It's straightforward. It's kind of like ground level, I should say. But it tells this story that if Hollywood told it, they would, like, you know, Colin Farrell would be in it. There'd be explosions. There'd be lasers. But no, it like plays it like this very real kind of. You buy into it because of how real Cody plays it in that movie. So I think that's Mute Date is another good pick. That will show you like, oh my gosh, you can do this with nothing, and it's just narration, and it's just like people staying in a park, and you're so engaged in the story and everything.
Yeah.
I think that's another good pick.
House, directed by Ethan Hansen.
Oh my gosh. Explain.
Let me just say, if you want to go into movies that do a lot with a little, this sounds so egotistical, but it's true.
I'm not going to stop you.
It's not wrong. House being a sci-fi film that's set in a house, but it's this kind of very strange, out there kind of story that's told in a very kind of abstract, weird, horror, sci-fi bent kind of way. That movie cost $40 to make, so it's very easy, and most of it was achieved just through the fact that I turned off all the lights and I filmed at night inside of a house. Yeah, so it's just kind of a movie that does a lot with very little dialogue. No script was written. Just had very, very broad scene outlines and just kind of improvised scenes and riffed off of it and just kind of built into this kind of strange story. Very slow pace. It's got a lot that happens in it. You might have more to say on it. I don't have a...
No.
Okay. You scored it, so I just wanted to give you a room if you wanted to talk on that.
Scored in GarageBand. It was... Well, I mean, I think you covered it all, really. Like, it's a movie... If you're into experimental stuff, that would be the big asterisk, which we are hugely... Like, we're huge experimental film people over here. We like that kind of stuff. And if we're going down that line too, like, say Last Day of Childhood, it's another good one. But I think folks who are already into experimental films, they probably are already more keen on, like, here's what you can do with nothing.
Yeah.
The House, for sure. Last Day of Childhood, for sure.
Last Day is a good one for editing.
For editing, yeah. I think something that feels a little more Hollywood would be Not Now, Ethan Stevens. And
that was one I was like, yeah.
And Not So Amazing by RC Films
and Video
everything.
Carnage by Jim Productions.
I'm not gonna say that.
Sorry.
I think those are two movies that, you know, again, while they're not like 100% like on like, and this isn't a knock against the movies, they are so close to Hollywood level. They're not quite there, but they're so close that it like doesn't matter because the story throughout is engaging. Because there's certain things that we just can't capture with no money. Like, we don't have the money for like top tier Dolby 5.1 surrounds. Like, that's just not possible. But you can still make an awesome Spider-Man movie. You can still make an awesome like romance drama movie that looks like, I would say looks like a Hollywood, like it looks like a Sundance Hollywood type movie.
100%.
I would say it's just as engaging, if not more engaging, than a lot of different Hollywood movies.
Oh yeah.
And those are more traditional, kind of like, oh, this feels more like a Hollywood movie. Those are great examples of what you can get away with.
What time are we at?
I know, I'm just thinking, we gotta...
Yeah.
I mean...
We can go on and on listing movies.
Gosh, I would love to. But we should probably wrap it up here. Point is, watch a lot of movies.
Yeah.
You'll be inspired.
There's so much out there. There's something for everyone.
And so I guess the last thing we'll close with, last two things, is first off, what do you, or maybe a better question, what are we working on right now?
Yeah, we're working on something this week.
Yep.
A little something. Little project.
What I can say is right after this, the reason we have to go so soon is we have to go do some camera and VFX tests.
Yeah.
Lighting tests and all that. Right now, while it's dark.
At the night time.
Yep, we have to do that. And I've been doing a lot of writing.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of writing. Been doing a lot of editing.
Yep.
Got this movie called The Bell Rings. If y'all haven't heard of it.
Yep.
I won't keep harping on it.
And that's that. So, and what are we watching this week? What have we been watching?
I've been revisiting The Mandalorian this week.
Oh,
starting
nice.
at season 1.
Nice.
That's been a lot of fun. Season 1 and season 2 feel very different looking back on it now while I'm revisiting. So it's kind of cool because I haven't watched the season 1 of Mandalorian in a minute.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. What else am I gonna watch?
The Jedi episode of season 2.
Oh my gosh!
Not the reveal of
Yeah.
Luke. I mean, I love that, but like the Ahsoka episode as its own. I've watched that episode the week that came out. I watched that like 5 times that weekend.
I'm watching with my girlfriend, and she's seen up to like the first 2 episodes of season 2, but we've just restarted because it's been a while, like over a year since she's a big Star Wars fan, but she hasn't gotten around to it. But I know she doesn't know what's coming in season 2.
She doesn't?
As far
Has
as
she
I
been
know,
living under a rock?
as far as I know, because she doesn't seek this stuff out. Like she's like a casual Star Wars fan. She's not like
How is it not? It was everywhere. Is she online? She's online.
Well, she was living in Australia at the time, so I know.
Because they don't get Twitter in Australia, I guess.
I don't think she looked because she's not on social media like that. I don't think she remembers.
Wow.
Or knows. I know she doesn't know about Ahsoka. I'm pretty sure.
Does she know who? Does she know who Ahsoka is?
She does know who Ahsoka is because I've been kind of like talking about it without trying to be obvious. So I'll talk about Clone Wars stuff because I'll edge in with all the Mandalorian stuff and talk about Clone Wars a little bit. I'll be like, oh, Ahsoka, and she's like, oh, is that one girl? And I'm like, yeah, it's that one girl.
Yeah.
So, but she doesn't know.
Wow.
So it's been kind of fun.
The one person who like hasn't been spoiled yet.
I know. And I'm just
don't let her listen to this because we just kind of spoiled it.
I know she's not listening to this.
Yeah. Nice.
So that's kind of the big thing. I haven't watched much else this last week. I need to find time to go see the Tragedy of Macbeth though.
Oh yeah, I gotta check that out. For me, still watching Smallville, but I've been also watching the behind the scenes on the Lord of the Rings movies.
Ooh.
Because every now and then I'll get that urge to watch the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I like to do it all back to back. Whereas with the behind the scenes stuff, I can just kind of pop it on. It's kind of like a podcast. I can just listen to it, or I can do other stuff. It's not my full attention, and I've seen it a bajillion times too.
Yeah.
So I just finished all of the special features on Fellowship of the Ring. I'm working through the Two Towers and watch all the other behind the scenes from those Middle Earth movies.
Nice.
It's been good. Speaking of what you can learn from movies.
I know.
We didn't even cover behind the scenes features, but I guess that's a different question.
Yeah. We do have a video on that actually.
Yeah, we have an old video.
Dig back a little ways. It's like 5 behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Things you can watch.
It's like the top DVD extras.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
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 Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
at least I think so.
We'll wrap it up here, folks. We got to get going. Got some filming to do.
Yeah.
So, but if you want more Doom production stuff, be sure to hit subscribe. We put out videos every week where we talk about films and filmmaking, and we also make feature films that you can check out on our channel right now for free. If you want to support this podcast and all of our filmmaking, a great way to do that is check out our merch store. There's a link down below where you can find cool t-shirts, cool movie posters. It's a great way to support us. But yeah, if you want to follow us also, check out our social media. We got a link tree down below. It's a great place to jump into all the Doom production stuff and just to be in the know of what's coming out next. But until the next episode of the podcast, we will see you all later.